Marcus Reed had fixed thousands of cars in his lifetime. He had designed engines for vehicles worth millions of dollars. He had once been the man that the largest European automakers called when they encountered problems no one else could solve. His name had appeared on 6 patents. His research had been cited in technical journals across 3 continents. Engineers half his age had studied his innovations in graduate school, treating his work like scripture. But this morning, he was just a 45-year-old man driving a 15-year-old pickup truck on Interstate 90, heading toward Chicago with exactly $47 in his wallet and a turkey sandwich in a brown paper bag sitting on the passenger seat. The sandwich was supposed to be lunch, though he had already decided to skip it like he skipped most meals these days. Food cost money. Money was for Emma. Everything was for Emma. The truck shuddered as he changed lanes, and Marcus patted the steering wheel the way a man might comfort an old friend who had seen better days. "Come on, old-timer, just a few more miles." He did not plan to stop for anything. Mrs. Patterson was waiting in her small house in the suburbs, her heating system broke in winter coming fast. She was 80 years old and living alone on a fixed income that barely covered groceries. The repair would have cost her $300 at any legitimate shop. Marcus would charge her $50 and call it even. He would probably end up charging her nothing at all once he saw the inside of her house and noticed whatever else needed fixing. Emma had confronted him about this last week, her 12-year-old eyes too serious for a child, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had learned to worry about bills and budgets when she should have been worrying about homework and friends. "Dad, you can't keep working for free. We need money." She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing something and acting on it were different matters entirely, and Marcus had spent 6 years learning that the hard way. The highway stretched ahead, gray pavement under gray November sky, and Marcus let his mind drift the way it always did when he drove alone. He thought about Rachel. He always thought about Rachel. Not the Rachel at the end, pale and thin in the hospital bed, but the Rachel from before. The Rachel who laughed too loud at his terrible jokes. The Rachel who made turkey sandwiches at 5:30 every morning before he left for work. Even though he rarely thanked her, even though he often came home too late and too tired to eat dinner with her. The Rachel who loved him more than he deserved and received far less than she was owed in return. She had been sick for 8 months before they caught it. 8 months of fatigue she blamed on stress weight loss she attributed to skipped meals, pain she dismissed as nothing serious. 8 months while Marcus worked 14-hour days in Stuttgart, designing engines for luxury cars, proving himself to colleagues who did not need convincing climbing a corporate ladder that led nowhere worth going. By the time the doctors found the cancer, it had already spread. 3 months, they said. Maybe less. There was nothing anyone could do. Rachel lived for 5 months. 2 months longer than predicted pure willpower keeping her alive because she wanted to see Emma graduate from first grade. She made it. She sat in the front row of that tiny auditorium so thin the chair seemed to swallow her whole, but smiling like the sun itself as Emma walked across the stage to collect her certificate of completion. 3 weeks later, she was gone. And Marcus had never gone back to being the man he was before. There are things more important than careers, he had told his boss in Stuttgart when he resigned. I spent 6 years learning to design engines, but I almost lost my wife without knowing she was sick. Maybe I was learning the wrong things. Those were his last words in the automotive industry. 6 years ago. A lifetime ago. The truck's engine coughed, pulling Marcus back to the present. He checked the gauges, noted nothing alarming, and kept driving. The exit for Mrs. Patterson's neighborhood was coming up in a few miles. He had work to do. Real work, the kind that helped people who needed helping, even if it did not pay well enough to keep the lights on. That was when he saw the BMW. It sat on the shoulder of the highway hazard lights, blinking weakly against the morning gloom. A late model X5 dark blue, probably worth more than Marcus earned in 2 years of odd jobs. The kind of car that came with roadside assistance and extended warranties and all the safety nets that money could buy. He should keep driving. Mrs. Patterson was waiting. He was already running late. Whoever owned that BMW surely had options that Marcus did not, resources that Marcus could not match, connections that Marcus had long since abandoned. But then he saw the woman inside. She was leaning forward, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, shoulders shaking. Not crying, Marcus could tell the difference after watching Rachel in those final months. This was something else. This was the tremor of someone fighting desperately not to fall apart, holding themselves together through sheer force of will because falling apart was not an option they could afford. Marcus knew that feeling. He had lived inside it for 6 months after Rachel died. Some mornings he still woke up with it wrapped around his chest like a vice. "Damn it!" he muttered and flipped on his turn signal. The truck pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind the BMW gravel, crunching under worn tires. Marcus killed the engine and sat there for a moment, looking down at his hands. These hands had once designed engines for Formula One racing teams. They had held patents worth millions. They had been featured in industry magazines and technical journals. Now they were rough and calloused, permanently stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing would ever remove. He wondered what the woman in the BMW would see when she looked at him. A stranger in old clothes. A potential threat. Someone to be wary of rather than grateful for. It did not matter. She needed help, and he could help. That was enough. Marcus stepped out of the truck. The November air hit him like a slap, cold and sharp with the promise of winter. He walked toward the BMW slowly, hands visible at his sides, trying to project calm rather than menace. The woman's head came up as he approached, and he saw her face for the first time through the driver's side window. Young late 20s or early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes that were trying very hard to hide their panic. Her suit looked expensive. Her hair was styled with professional precision. Everything about her screamed success and power and the kind of life Marcus had left behind. Everything except those eyes which were begging for someone to make this situation better. He knocked gently on the window. She hesitated for half a second, calculating risks and options, then lowered the glass. "Morning." Marcus kept his voice quiet and steady. "Saw you pulled over. Everything okay?" The car died. Her voice was tight, controlled, fighting to stay professional instead of desperate. "Just died. I have a meeting in..." She glanced at her phone, and her face went pale. 22 minutes. 17 miles from here. And I don't know what's wrong, and roadside assistant said 45 minutes, and I can't. She stopped herself, took a breath. Marcus recognized the effort it cost her. "Mind if I take a look?" Those sharp eyes studied him, taking in the flannel shirt and worn jeans and work boots that had seen better decades. "Do you know cars?" Marcus almost laughed. He had spent 20 years of his life knowing cars better than he knew his own family. He had designed systems that were now industry standards. He had solved problems that teams of engineers had declared impossible. "I know enough. Something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded and reached for the hood release. Marcus heard the soft click and walked around to the front of the vehicle, lifting the hood with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times before. The engine bay was immaculate, the way expensive cars always were when their owners paid for regular maintenance without ever learning what that maintenance actually involved. Marcus leaned in one hand, braced on the frame, and let his eyes do the work that diagnostic computers could never quite match. 20 years of experience, 20 years of reading engines like other people read books, 20 years of understanding the relationship between systems that most mechanics never bothered to learn. Battery terminals corroded. That was the first problem, but not the main one. He listened, placed his palm flat on the engine block, felt for vibrations that machines could not measure. Fuel pump relay. Dead. He knew it the way a doctor knows a diagnosis before the test results come back, intuition built on thousands of hours of practice. Try starting it. The woman turned the key. A weak click, pathetic and final. Exactly what he expected. 2 problems, Marcus said, straightening up. Corroded battery terminals and a dead fuel pump relay. I can get you running temporarily, but you'll need to take it in for proper repair afterward. How long? 10 minutes, maybe 15. Do it, please. Marcus walked back to his truck and retrieved his toolbox, the same one his father had given him 35 years ago when Marcus was 10 years old and eager to learn how things worked. The leather was cracked and faded, now the metal clasps tarnished, but the tools inside were still sharp and true. Some things lasted if you took care of them. He worked quickly but carefully, the way he had always worked. Brush to clean the corrosion, wrench to tighten the connections, rag to wipe everything down. His hands moved with the confidence of long practice, no wasted motion, no uncertainty. My father used to say that a man is measured by what he can fix, not what he can buy. Marcus did not look up as he spoke. I've tried to live by that. The woman had gotten out of her car and was watching him work, arms crossed against the cold. Sounds like a wise man. He was. He's gone now, but the lesson stuck. The relay bypass was trickier. Marcus had to splice into the wiring harness, create a temporary connection that would hold long enough to get her where she needed to go. It was not pretty work, not the kind of elegant solution he would have designed in his engineering days. But it was practical, and sometimes practical was all that mattered. Try it again. The engine roared to life, smooth, strong. The dashboard light stabilized. Then it coughed, stuttered, died. Marcus was already back under the hood before she could speak. His eyes tracked the system, searching for what he had missed. There in the secondary wiring harness, a short circuit he had not spotted on the first pass. The kind of problem that dealerships would take 2 days to diagnose and a week to repair. He fixed it in 4 minutes. Now! The engine started, held, purred like nothing had ever been wrong. The woman's face transformed relief, washing over her so powerfully that she actually swayed on her feet. Oh, thank God. How much do I owe you? Nothing. That's not possible. You just spent... She checked her phone. 32 minutes fixing my car. You have to let me pay you something. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag that was already beyond saving. I don't do this for money. Then why? The question hung in the cold air between them, and Marcus found himself answering honestly without quite meaning to. Because sometimes people need help, and sometimes the person helping needs to feel useful. Today, I needed that. She stared at him, and Marcus watched something shift behind those intelligent eyes. The way she looked at him changed just slightly. Not the gaze of a rich woman examining a poor stranger. Something more. Something like recognition or the beginning of understanding. I'm Victoria Lawson. Marcus Reed. At least let me give you something for your time. I'm fine. Please. She reached into her car and emerged with a brown paper bag, holding it out to him. Turkey sandwich. I made it this morning. I was going to eat it later, but you need it more than I do. Marcus looked at the bag. Simple. Humble. Exactly like the sandwiches Rachel used to make for him every morning, the ones he had taken for granted, the ones he would give anything to receive just one more time. His throat tightened. You sure? Completely. It's the least I can do. He took the sandwich, carefully holding it like something precious. Thank you. Victoria reached into her bag again and pressed a business card into his palm. The card stock was thick and expensive, the letters embossed in black. Victoria Lawson, Vice President of Strategic Development, Harborline Motors. If you ever need anything, she said, call me. I mean it. Then she was in her car and pulling back onto the highway, accelerating toward wherever she needed to be. And Marcus stood alone on the shoulder with a sandwich in one hand and a business card in the other, and the strange feeling that something important had just happened. Victoria would arrive at Harborline 7 minutes late, her hair still windswept from the highway, a smudge of grease on her sleeve she would not notice until the meeting ended. But her presentation would be flawless. The board would approve the partnership unanimously. And for the rest of that day, between congratulations and strategy sessions, she would find her thoughts drifting back to the stranger in the flannel shirt who had asked for nothing in return. He did not eat the sandwich immediately. He stood there for 5 minutes, watching the BMW disappear into the distance, thinking about what had just occurred. He had helped a stranger. Nothing unusual about that. He helped strangers all the time, fix their cars and their heaters and their leaky faucets, charged them whatever they could afford, and called it square. But this felt different. The way she had looked at him when he explained why he helped. The way she had offered the sandwich not as payment or charity, but as genuine human connection. The way she had said, call me, like she actually meant it. Marcus looked at the business card again. Harborline Motors. He knew that company. 10 years ago, he had almost taken a job there before deciding to go to Germany instead. They were trying to break into the electric vehicle market. Now he had seen that in the news. He slipped the card into his pocket and climbed back into his truck. Mrs. Patterson was still waiting. Her heater still needed fixing. Life still had to continue. But for the first time in 6 years, Marcus felt something stirring in his chest that he had thought was dead forever. Hope, maybe, or just the recognition that the universe was trying to tell him something. Either way, he was listening. The drive to Mrs. Patterson's house took another 40 minutes. Marcus fixed her heating system in an hour, discovered that her water heater was also failing, fixed that too, and accepted $20 and a cup of coffee because that was all she could afford, and he could not bear to take more. She reminded him of his own grandmother, gone now for decades, and he sat with her for an extra 30 minutes, listening to stories about her late husband and the house they had built together and the life they had shared before time and illness took him away. "You're a good man," Mrs. Patterson said as he was leaving. "Your wife must be very proud." "She passed away 6 years ago." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." "It's okay." She taught me everything worth knowing. I'm still learning from her every day. Marcus drove home through the darkening afternoon, the sandwich still sitting on the passenger seat where he had placed it that morning. He had not been able to eat it. Every time he looked at it, he thought of Rachel, and the memories were too heavy to swallow. The apartment he shared with Emma was small 2 bedrooms and a living room that doubled as a kitchen in a building that had seen better years. But it was clean and warm and safe, and Emma had made it feel like home by covering the walls with her artwork and filling the shelves with books from the library and generally refusing to let their circumstances define their happiness. She was sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in, homework spread in front of her, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look exactly like her mother. She glanced up at the sound of the door, and her eyes immediately cataloged his expression the way they always did, searching for signs of trouble or sadness. "You're late." "Sorry, Bug. Got held up on the highway." "You stopped to help someone again, didn't you?" "Yeah." Emma sighed a sound far too old for a 12-year-old. "Dad, we have $847 in our account. Rent is $1,200. You can't keep." "I know, Bug. I know." He sat down across from her, looking into eyes that were so much like Rachel's, it sometimes stopped his heart. "Do you know what your mom always used to say?" Emma shook her head. "She said money can be earned again, but the chance to do the right thing only comes once sometimes. I stopped today because someone needed help, and I'll never regret that." "But what about us? What about the bills?" "I'll figure it out. I always figure it out, don't I?" Emma looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The trust in her eyes was almost more than Marcus could bear. He did not deserve it. He had failed Rachel by working too much and being home too little. He would not fail Emma the same way, even if it meant struggling financially, even if it meant giving up everything he had once been. After Emma went to bed, Marcus sat alone in the kitchen with the sandwich still in front of him. He thought about Rachel, about the mornings she had woken early to make him food he never appreciated, about the evenings she had waited for him to come home from jobs that seemed so important at the time and meant nothing now, about all the moments he had missed, all the conversations they never had, all the time he had wasted chasing success, while his wife was slowly dying without him even noticing. "Am I doing the right thing, Rachel?" He spoke to the empty room, to the silence, to the memory of a woman who had loved him better than he deserved. "Or am I just running away forever?" There was no answer. There never was. But that night, for the first time in 6 years, Marcus dreamed about the future instead of the past. 3 days passed. Marcus fixed a broken garbage disposal for Mr. Chen down the hall, reattached a loose gutter for the Hendersons across the street, and helped a teenager named Marcus Jr. from the building next door replace the brakes on his first car. None of them paid more than $20. Most paid nothing at all. Emma watched these transactions with increasing frustration, her young face pinched with worry that no child should have to carry. She understood money in ways that broke Marcus's heart, knew the cost of groceries and the weight of rent, and the fear of an envelope marked "Final Notice." He had tried to shield her from these things, but children see more than adults realize, and Emma had seen enough. "Dad." She cornered him on Thursday evening, her voice carrying the steel she had inherited from her mother. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this." She gestured broadly at the apartment, at the stack of bills on the counter, at the reality of their lives. "About the fact that we're going to be short on rent again, and you spent 6 hours yesterday fixing Mrs. Patterson's heater for free." I charged her $20. $20 for 6 hours of work. That's $3 an hour, Dad. That's less than minimum wage. She couldn't afford more. And what about us? What about what we can't afford? Marcus had no answer for that. Emma was right, and they both knew it. But knowing something and changing it were different matters, and he had spent 6 years proving he was better at the former than the latter. I'll figure something out. You always say that. And I always do. Not always. Emma's voice softened the steel, giving way to something sadder. Sometimes you just get by. And I'm scared that someday getting by won't be enough. She went to her room without another word, and Marcus sat alone with the truth of what she had said pressing down on him like a physical weight. The phone rang on Friday evening. Unknown number. Marcus almost did not answer. Marcus Reed. Hi, this is Victoria Lawson, from the highway the other day. Marcus straightened in his chair, surprised. Is your car okay? Did something go wrong? No, the car's perfect. The dealership said your work was professional grade. They wanted to know who to hire. I don't work for dealerships. I know. That's part of why I'm calling. There was a pause, and Marcus could hear something in her voice. Hesitation mixed with determination, like someone about to say something they had been thinking about for days. I did some research on you. After we met, Marcus Reed, 6 patents on powertrain systems, 10 years. With BMW Munich, 3 years designing for Porsche racing teams. You were one of the best automotive engineers of your generation. Marcus said nothing. And now you're fixing heaters for elderly women and charging $20 for work worth $300. I'm not judging. I'm just curious. Why? The question hung in the air, and Marcus found himself answering honestly because something about this woman made dishonesty feel impossible. Do you have time for a story? I have all the time you need. They met at a small coffee shop near Marcus's apartment, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed by someone who actually cared. Victoria arrived in another expensive suit, and Marcus arrived in his flannel shirt, and they looked like visitors from different planets sitting across from each other. But when Marcus began to speak, the distance between them seemed to shrink. He told her about Rachel, about how they met at Northwestern, 2 young people who knew nothing about life except that they wanted to face it together. About the wedding in her parents' backyard, 40 guests and a thunderstorm that started during the vows and ended just in time for the first dance. About Emma being born and changing everything, making the world bigger and smaller at the same time. He told her about the career, the promotions and the patents and the recognition, the long hours and the missed dinners and the weekends spent in the office instead of with his family. The way success felt like oxygen, something he could not live without, something worth any sacrifice. He told her about the diagnosis. The 8 months Rachel had been sick while he worked 14-hour days in Stuttgart. The weight loss he had not noticed. The fatigue he had attributed to stress. The pain she had hidden because she knew how important his career was to him. I was the best engineer in the room, Marcus said, staring into his coffee cup, and the worst husband at home. Rachel never complained. She just quietly endured waiting for me to come home every night, performing small acts of love. I took for granted until they were gone, and I thought that was normal. By the time she got sick, I realized how much I had missed. All the breakfasts I skipped, all the dinners I came home too late for, all the small moments that I can never get back. Victoria listened without interrupting, her intelligent eyes focused entirely on him. So I quit. Not because I hated the work, I loved it, but because I couldn't keep pretending that designing engines mattered more than being with my daughter. Emma lost her mother. She couldn't lose her father, too. And you don't regret it? Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze directly. I regret every day, but not about quitting. I regret the years I wasted, the breakfasts I didn't eat with Rachel, the evenings I came home too tired to say I love you. Those are what I regret. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Marcus had expected. Victoria told him about her own life, the small town in Ohio where she grew up, the father who never let her near his beloved Mustang because she was a girl, the spite that drove her to learn everything about cars just to prove him wrong. He died before she could show him what she had become, and she had been chasing his approval ever since, even though he was no longer there to give it. We're both haunted by people we lost, she said. Maybe that's why I stopped being scared of you on that highway. Something in your eyes looked familiar. What do you mean? You looked like someone who understood loss. Like someone who had been broken and was still putting the pieces back together. Marcus did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, and the silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. 3 weeks later, Victoria called again. I want to show you something. At Harborline. Why? Because I think you need to see it. And because I think we need you. Marcus wanted to refuse. He had left that world behind. He had promised himself, promised Rachel's memory, promised Emma that he would never go back to being the man who sacrificed everything for work. But there was something in Victoria's voice, not pressure, but genuine belief that made him hesitate. Let me talk to Emma first. That evening, Marcus sat down with his daughter and explained everything. The phone call, the invitation, what it might mean for their lives if he accepted. Emma listened with the seriousness that had become her default expression, absorbing every word before speaking. Do you want to go? I don't know. But how did you feel when that woman called, when she talked about showing you the lab? Marcus thought about it, really thought the way Emma deserved. I felt like the man I used to be, before the grief, before I forgot who I was, for the first time in years. Emma nodded slowly. Then you should go. Mom always said the only thing worse than failing is never trying. If you try and it doesn't work, at least you'll know. But if you don't try, you'll wonder forever. Marcus looked at his daughter, this child who had lost her mother at 6 and grown up with a father too sad to be fully present, this 12-year-old who worried about bills and rent and things no child should have to consider. She deserved better. And maybe the best way to give her better was not hiding from the world, but showing her that even after tragedy, a person could stand back up and begin again. Okay, Bug, I'll go. Harborline Motors headquarters rose against the Chicago sky like a monument to corporate ambition, all glass and steel and implicit statements about wealth and power. Marcus parked his battered pickup in a lot full of luxury vehicles and felt immediately out of place. Victoria met him in the lobby, dressed impeccably, looking like she belonged to this world in ways Marcus no longer did. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, though I'm not sure what I'm doing here. You'll see. She led him through security, down corridors lined with photographs of classic Harborline models, into an elevator that required a key card to access the upper floors. They did not go to an office or a conference room. They went to the research and development wing, a section of the building most employees never saw. The laboratory space was enormous. Workbenches and diagnostic equipment and prototype vehicles in various stages of assembly. Engineers moved between stations, their conversations a mixture of technical jargon and creative problem-solving. Marcus stopped in the doorway, his entire body going still. He knew this world. He had lived in it for 20 years. The smell of machine oil and metal, the hum of equipment, the particular energy of people working on something important. All of it rushed back like a wave he had been holding at bay for 6 years. "This is our EV development lab," Victoria said quietly. "We're 18 months into a project that's supposed to revolutionize Harborline's position in the electric market. But we're stuck. Battery integration keeps creating thermal management problems. Powertrain efficiency is below projections. And every solution creates 2 new problems." Marcus walked deeper into the lab, drawn to a prototype chassis like a magnet. His eyes tracked across the systems, cataloging everything with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what he was seeing. His hands itched to touch, to feel, to diagnose the way he had been diagnosing machines since he was 10 years old, and his father first handed him a wrench. A woman looked up from her workstation and frowned at the stranger in street clothes. "Can I help you?" "He's with me," Victoria said. "Michelle, this is Marcus Reed. Marcus Michelle Chen, our current technical lead." Michelle's frown deepened, then cleared into something like recognition. "Reed, wait. Marcus Reed, the one who published the Stuttgart paper on hybrid thermodynamics. You read that. Read it. I cited it in my thesis. That paper changed how I think about heat dissipation in compact systems. What are you doing here?" "I'm not entirely sure," Marcus admitted, glancing at Victoria. "I asked him to consult," Victoria said smoothly. "Fresh perspective on the integration problem." Michelle studied him for a moment, professional curiosity overriding her skepticism. "Well, if you want fresh perspective, start here." She pulled up schematics on a large monitor. "We're getting thermal spikes in the battery pack during rapid discharge cycles. Every cooling solution we've tried either adds too much weight or creates new failure points." Marcus studied the schematic in silence, letting his mind sink into the familiar patterns of system analysis. 20 years of experience. 20 years of understanding how components related to each other in ways that textbooks never quite captured. 20 years of solving problems that other engineers declared impossible. 60 seconds. That was all it took. "You're routing the coolant wrong." Everyone in the vicinity turned to look at him. Marcus pointed to a section of the design. "Here. You're fighting the natural heat distribution instead of working with it. If you reverse this flow path and add a secondary buffer here," his finger traced a line across the screen, "you'll reduce peak temperature by at least 15% without adding weight." Michelle's eyes widened. "That's actually brilliant. Why didn't we see that?" "Because you're too close to it. You've been staring at this design for months, so you see what you expect to see instead of what's actually there." He straightened up, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not complicated. Any experienced engineer would spot it eventually." "We've had 6 experienced engineers looking at this for 3 months, Michelle said flatly. "You saw it in 60 seconds. Before Marcus could respond, a man appeared in the doorway of the lab. Harrison Blake, CEO of Harborline, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, watching the exchange with an expression of intense interest. "Mr. Reed." He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Harrison Blake, Victoria speaks very highly of you." "Sir?" I understand you have thoughts on our thermal management challenges. Walk me through them." What followed was 20 minutes of technical discussion that left Victoria feeling simultaneously proud and completely out of her depth. Marcus explained his observations with the kind of clear, methodical thinking that made complex problems seem obvious in retrospect. Harrison asked sharp questions, pushing back on assumptions, testing whether Marcus's confidence was backed by genuine understanding. It was. When they finished, Harrison was smiling, not his polite executive smile, but the genuine expression he wore when he had found something valuable. "Mr. Reed, I'd like to offer you a position. Technical consultant. 3 months part-time work from home, when possible on-site time as needed. We'll pay you consultant rates which are considerably higher than staff positions, and you'll report directly to Victoria on the EV integration project. If it works out, we can discuss something more permanent. If it doesn't, you walk away with professional experience you can leverage elsewhere and enough money to make it worth your time." Marcus felt the offer settle over him, like a weight heavy with implications. "I have a daughter. She's my first priority. That's non-negotiable." "Understood." Victoria mentioned that. "If there's a school event or an emergency, I handle it. No questions asked." "Mr. Reed," Harrison's voice softened, "I have 3 grown children. I remember what it was like trying to balance career and family. I won't pretend we're perfect at accommodating parents, but I will commit to making this work if you're willing to try." Marcus looked at Victoria, then back at Harrison. 6 years. 6 years he had been hiding from this world. But maybe hiding was not the answer. Maybe the answer was finding a way back on his own terms, in his own way. "Let me think about it, and talk to Emma." "Absolutely." That night, Marcus sat in his kitchen with Emma telling her everything that had happened, about the lab, about the problem he had solved, about Harrison's offer. Emma listened with her usual seriousness, processing every word before speaking. When he finished, she asked, "Do you want to do it?" "I don't know." "But how did you feel when you were in that lab, looking at those schematics?" Marcus remembered. The feeling of understanding systems that had baffled others. The rush of 20 years of experience flowing through him like electricity. The sense of purpose he had not felt since before Rachel got sick. "I felt alive." Emma smiled, and it was Rachel's smile, full of warmth and wisdom. "Mom would have wanted you to take this chance. She believed in new beginnings more than anyone I know. And Dad, you've been standing still for 6 years. Maybe it's time to start moving again." Marcus looked at his daughter, this child who had lost so much and still found reasons to hope. She deserved a father who showed her that life could begin again after tragedy. That grief did not have to be a prison, that a person could fall down and get back up and become something new. "Okay, Bug, I'll try." Emma hugged him tight, and for the first time in 6 years, Marcus felt like he was moving forward instead of just surviving. The next morning, he called Victoria. "Tell Harrison, yes." The call lasted less than a minute. 3 words that changed everything. Tell Harrison, yes. But after Marcus hung up, he sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, staring at the phone in his hand like it might explain what he had just done. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of telling himself that the corporate world was poison, that ambition was the enemy, that the only way to be a good father was to reject everything he had once been. And now, with 3 words, he had undone all of it. Emma had already left for school, her backpack stuffed with books, and her lunch money carefully counted from the jar on the counter. She had hugged him before she left tighter than usual, and whispered something that still echoed in his mind. "I'm proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too." Marcus hoped she was right. He needed her to be right, because the doubt was already creeping in the voice in his head that sounded like guilt and fear and 6 years of grief compressed into a single question. What if this was a mistake he needed to talk to someone who would not judge? Someone who had always understood him, even when he did not understand himself. The cemetery was 20 minutes from the apartment, a quiet place with old trees and neat rows of headstones and the kind of silence that felt respectful rather than empty. Marcus had not visited in 3 months, not because he had forgotten Rachel, but because sometimes the weight of standing at her grave was more than he could carry. Today, he needed to carry it. Her headstone was simple. White marble, clean lines, her name and dates, and a single phrase she had chosen herself during those final weeks when she knew the end was coming. Love fiercely, forgive, freely live fully. Marcus knelt on the cold ground and placed his hand on the stone the way he used to place his hand on her shoulder when she was stressed or sad or just needed to know he was there. "Hey, Rach." The wind rustled through the bare branches above him, and Marcus chose to believe it was her way of saying hello. "I did something today. Something I'm not sure about. There's this company Harborline, and they want me to come back. To engineering. To the work I used to do before everything fell apart." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I know what you'd say. You'd say I should try. That hiding from the world isn't the same as living in it. That Emma needs a father who shows her that people can heal, not just survive." The wind picked up, and Marcus felt tears on his cheeks that he had not noticed forming. "But I'm scared, Rachel. Scared that I'll become that person again. The one who worked too much and loved too little. The one who missed 8 months of your illness because he was too busy being successful to notice his wife was dying." He wiped his face with the back of his hand, not caring that he was crying in public, not caring about anything except the conversation he needed to have with a woman who could no longer answer. "Emma said you'd be proud of me, and I want that more than anything. I want to be someone you'd be proud of. Someone Emma can be proud of. Someone who didn't let your death turn into an excuse to stop living." Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold marble, the same way Rachel used to press her forehead against his when they were young and in love and convinced they had forever. "I'm going to try, Rach. For Emma. For you. For the man I should have been when you were alive. I'm going to try to be better. And if I start to lose myself again, if I start to forget what matters, I need you to send me a sign. Something to remind me why I'm really doing this." He stayed at the grave for another 30 minutes talking about Emma and the apartment, and Mrs. Patterson's heater, and all the small things that made up his life now. He told Rachel about Victoria, about the highway and the sandwich, and the strange feeling that the universe was trying to tell him something. He told her about the lab and the thermal problem and how it had felt to solve something again, to use his brain for more than remembering what he had lost. When he finally stood up, his knees ached from kneeling on the cold ground, but something in his chest felt lighter. "I love you," he said to the headstone. "I always will, but I think maybe it's time to start loving myself again too. You'd want that. I know you'd want that." The wind died down, and in the silence that followed, Marcus could almost hear Rachel's voice. "Go, Marcus. Go and live. Go and be the man I always knew you could be." He walked back to his truck with his head held higher than it had been in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of mundane tasks that felt different, somehow charged with possibility in a way they had not been before. Marcus cleaned the apartment, did the laundry, prepared dinner for Emma, and found himself humming a song that Rachel used to love, one he had not been able to listen to since her funeral. When Emma came home from school, she found him in the kitchen with actual groceries on the counter. Not just the bare minimum they usually survived on, but real food ingredients for a meal that required effort and attention. "Dad, what's going on?" I called Victoria. I said yes. Emma's face broke into a smile so wide it transformed her entire appearance, making her look like the carefree child she should have been instead of the worried, almost teenager she had been forced to become. "Really? You're really doing it?" "Really?" She threw her arms around him, and Marcus held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the solid reality of her small body against his chest. "I'm scared, Bug. I want you to know that. This might not work. I might fail. But I'm going to try anyway because you were right. Mom would want me to try. And I think maybe I owe it to both of you to find out if there's still something left of the man I used to be." Emma pulled back and looked at him with those serious eyes. "There is, Dad. There always was. You just forgot how to see it. But I never did. Mom never did either. That's why she loved you so much." Marcus did not trust himself to speak, so he just nodded and turned back to the stove, blinking away tears and focusing on the simple task of making dinner for his daughter. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the business card Victoria had given him on the highway. He turned it over in his hands, reading the embossed letters, feeling the weight of what they represented. Tomorrow, everything would change. He would walk into Harborline as a consultant, as an expert, as someone with value beyond fixing heaters and unclogging drains. He would use skills he had buried for 6 years. He would face challenges he had convinced himself he no longer wanted. And he would do it all while trying to remain the father Emma needed, the man Rachel had loved, the person he was still learning to become. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time since Rachel's death, Marcus felt ready to try. He placed the business card carefully on the counter where he would see it first thing in the morning, and went to bed with something that felt almost like peace. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. The first Wednesday morning at Harborline, Marcus arrived 30 minutes early, not because of nerves, though those were present too, humming beneath his skin like electricity. He arrived early because that was how he had lived his entire life, following a principle his father had drilled into him 4 decades ago. Arriving early means being on time. Being on time means being late. Being late is unacceptable. 40 years later, the lesson still held. The laboratory was empty when he walked through the doors, only the hum of machinery and the pale light of dawn filtering through the high windows. Marcus stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting himself absorb the space, the smell of machine oil and metal, the organized chaos of workbenches covered with components and diagnostic equipment, the prototype vehicles in various stages of assembly, each one representing millions of dollars and thousands of hours of human effort. He had lived in this world for 20 years. Then he had left it for 6. And now he was back, standing on the threshold between past and future, unsure which direction he was really facing. "You're early." Marcus turned. Michelle Chen stood at the entrance, coffee cup in hand, studying him with an expression that mixed curiosity with something that might have been respect. Old habit. Good habit. She walked toward him and held out a second cup. Peace offering. I'll admit I was skeptical when Victoria first mentioned you, but that thing you spotted with the thermal routing, that was genuinely impressive. I want to learn how you see problems that way. Marcus accepted the coffee, surprised by the gesture. There's nothing special about it, just 20 years of experience, the kind of thing you can't learn from textbooks. That's exactly what we're missing around here. They stood together in the quiet laboratory, two engineers from different generations, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This was not the hostile reception he had expected. This was something else entirely. The rest of the team began arriving over the next hour, young faces with prestigious degrees and cutting-edge knowledge and the particular confidence that came from never having failed at anything important. They looked at Marcus the way he expected them to look, taking in the flannel shirt and worn jeans and work boots, making calculations about what this middle-aged stranger could possibly offer their high-tech world. Marcus did not try to convince them with words. He never had. Instead, he watched and waited for the opportunity to demonstrate what 40 years of working with machines had taught him. The opportunity came faster than expected. One of the younger engineers, a Stanford graduate named Kevin, who could not have been older than 26, was running a computer simulation that kept producing anomalous results. He had been staring at the screen for 20 minutes, frustration mounting visibly when Marcus walked over and looked at the data. Your friction coefficient is wrong. Kevin looked up, startled and slightly offended. Excuse me. The software is using theoretical values, but with this particular alloy, real-world friction runs about 12% higher. That's why your simulation keeps breaking down. How could you possibly know that? Marcus met his eyes calmly. Because I've touched that metal, felt how it moves. Software is a wonderful tool, but it can't replace putting your hands on an actual engine. He gestured toward the prototype across the room. Let me show you. What followed was a 15-minute demonstration that left Kevin and three other engineers watching with expressions that shifted from skepticism to something closer to awe. Marcus worked his way through the prototype systems, identifying issues that the simulations had missed, explaining the relationships between components that computer models could never fully capture. The problem isn't your calculations, Marcus said when he finished. Your calculations are perfect. The problem is that reality doesn't care about perfect calculations. Reality cares about what actually happens when metal meets metal and heat builds up, and systems start talking to each other in ways the textbooks don't describe. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. I've never thought about it that way. You will. Give it 20 years. By the end of the first week, the initial skepticism had begun transforming into grudging respect. Marcus solved three problems that the team had been struggling with for months, not through brilliant innovation, but through the simple application of experience that no amount of education could replace. He knew how engines behaved because he had spent decades listening to them, touching them, learning their languages in ways that younger engineers had never had the chance to develop. But not everyone appreciated his presence. Derek Sullivan appeared on the second Wednesday, materializing in the laboratory doorway like a shark sensing blood in the water. He was 35, handsome in a polished way that suggested careful grooming and calculated presentation, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a month of odd jobs. So this is the genius Victoria found on the side of the highway. Marcus straightened from the prototype he had been examining, wiping his hands on a rag. Can I help you? Derek Sullivan, Vice President of Business Development. The title came with a slight emphasis, a reminder of rank and position. Victoria's competitor for the senior VP position that opens next quarter. I'm just here to work on the technical problems. Of course you are. Derek's smile did not reach his eyes. I've read your file, by the way. Impressive history. Munich, Stuttgart racing teams. Then you just disappeared. Dropped off the face of the earth for 6 years. He paused, letting the silence do its work. Some people might wonder about that. Might wonder if you really left voluntarily, or if there was something else. Something that made you unemployable. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice level. My wife died. I quit to raise my daughter. That's the whole story. Touching, very touching. Derek glanced around the laboratory, taking inventory of who was watching, who was listening. I just hope you understand what you're walking into here. Victoria has staked a lot on your success. If you fail, she fails with you. And some people might say she let personal feelings cloud her professional judgment. I don't know anything about personal feelings. I only know about work, and my work will speak for itself. Derek's smile widened, showing too many teeth. We'll see. He left without another word, and Marcus stood in the silence that followed, feeling the weight of a threat that had not been stated but was perfectly clear. Corporate politics, office games, the kind of maneuvering that had nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with power and ego and the eternal human need to tear down anyone who might be a threat. This was why he had left. This was what he had spent 6 years trying to escape. But he was here now. Emma was counting on him. Victoria had believed in him. And Marcus Reed had never been the kind of man who backed down from a challenge just because it was difficult. He turned back to the prototype and got to work. The weeks blurred together, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. Marcus's redesign of the thermal management system went into testing and exceeded every projection, reducing peak temperatures by 18% instead of the 15% he had promised. He identified a flaw in the powertrain design that would have caused failures after 50,000 miles a catch that saved the company an estimated $12 million in future warranty costs. His reputation grew quietly, spreading through whispered conversations and impressed glances from engineers who had initially dismissed him. Michelle became his strongest ally, defending his methods to anyone who questioned them, learning from his experience with a humility that Marcus found refreshing after years of dealing with egos. But the real test came on a Tuesday afternoon in his 8th week when Harrison Blake called him into the executive office. Have a seat, Marcus. The CEO's office was everything. The laboratory was not all clean lines and expensive furniture and windows that looked out over the Chicago skyline like a king surveying his domain. Marcus sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than his truck and waited for whatever was coming. The board is impressed with your work. Very impressed. The thermal management solution alone is worth more than we'll pay you in 10 years of consulting fees. Harrison leaned back, studying Marcus with the calculating gaze of a man who had spent 40 years evaluating talent. I want to offer you a full-time position, Chief Technical Officer for the entire EV division. Salary, benefits, the complete package. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate, though he kept his face neutral. That's a significant offer. It's a significant role. You'd be responsible for all technical decisions across 3 development teams. Direct report to the board. A seat at the table where the real decisions get made. And the flexibility we discussed, my daughter, is still my priority. Still applies. We'll structure the position around your needs, not the other way around. I've learned the hard way that burning out talented people serves no one." Harrison paused. "Victoria will be your direct supervisor, assuming she gets the senior VP position, which she will after the success of this project. Is that going to be a problem?" Marcus thought about Victoria, about the weeks of working together, the morning coffees and evening debriefs, and the way she always knew exactly when to push and when to step back. He thought about how she looked when she was excited about a breakthrough, how she defended her team against bureaucratic interference, how she had given him this chance when no one else would have. He thought about feelings he was not ready to examine too closely. No problem at all. "Then we have a deal." Marcus extended his hand. "We have a deal." The celebration that evening was small and private, just Marcus and Emma in their apartment with pizza and the kind of joy that came from finally seeing hard work pay off. Emma danced around the living room while Marcus watched, laughing at her enthusiasm while trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Chief Technical Officer. A real salary. Benefits. Stability. Things he had not had in 6 years. Things he had convinced himself he did not need. "Dad." Emma stopped dancing and looked at him with sudden seriousness. "Does this mean Victoria is going to be around more?" "She's my boss, so yes, I'll be working with her closely." "No, I mean around here, at the apartment, like having dinner with us and stuff." Marcus hesitated. He and Victoria had maintained careful professional boundaries, never crossing the line between colleagues and something more. But Emma was perceptive, always had been, and she was clearly seeing something that Marcus had been trying not to acknowledge. "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile different when you talk about her. Like how you used to smile when you talked about Mom before she got sick." The observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had not realized it was so obvious, had not realized he was doing it at all. "Victoria and I are friends, Bug. That's all. For now." Emma's smile was knowing far too mature for a 12-year-old. "But I think maybe she could be more. And I think Mom would be okay with that." She went back to dancing before Marcus could respond, leaving him alone with thoughts he was not prepared to have. Victoria came to the apartment for the first time 3 weeks later, ostensibly to discuss project timelines over dinner. Marcus had cleaned the entire place, bought actual groceries, even put on a button-down shirt instead of his usual flannel. Emma had noticed all of this and said nothing, but her smile spoke volumes. The evening started awkwardly, two people trying to pretend they were just colleagues when the air between them practically crackled with unspoken tension. But Emma broke the ice within minutes, peppering Victoria with questions about her job, her car, her opinion on various important matters, like whether dogs were better than cats and what her favorite pizza topping was. "So you're the one who gave my dad a job." Victoria glanced at Marcus, then back at Emma. "Your dad gave himself a job. I just opened the door. He's the one who proved he belonged on the other side." "That's nice of you to say, but I know the truth." Emma leaned forward conspiratorially. "He was really sad before he met you. Like really, really sad. He tried to hide it, but I could tell. And then, after that day on the highway, he started being different. Better." "Emma." Marcus felt his face heating. "That's not appropriate." "What? It's true." Emma turned back to Victoria with the fearless honesty of youth. "My mom died when I was 6, and my dad kind of stopped living after that. He was here, but he wasn't really here, you know. Like part of him was somewhere else." Victoria's expression softened. "I know exactly what you mean. But now he's back, the real him. And I think you're part of why." Emma studied Victoria with eyes that were far too old for her age. So I guess what I'm saying is thank you for bringing my dad back. The silence that followed was charged with emotion that none of them quite knew how to express. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand, and Marcus watched the two most important women in his life connect in a way he had not dared to hope for. "Your mom must have been an amazing woman," Victoria said quietly, "to raise a daughter like you. She was the best." Emma's voice was steady, no tears, just simple truth. "And she would have liked you. Rachel believed that kindness without expectation revealed true character. The way someone treats a stranger they will never see again, that was her test. You passed it the moment you stopped on that highway before you even knew my name." Marcus cleared his throat, trying to regain control of his emotions. "Okay, Bug. I think that's enough interrogation for one evening." "I wasn't interrogating. I was evaluating." Emma grinned. "She passes by the way. You have my approval." Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that filled the small apartment with warmth. "I'm honored." "You should be. I'm very picky." After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Victoria sat on the small balcony that overlooked the parking lot, nursing glasses of wine and watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "She's remarkable," Victoria said. "You've done an amazing job with her." "She's done an amazing job with herself. I've just tried not to get in the way." "That's not true, and you know it." Victoria turned to look at him, her face half shadowed in the dim light. "She adores you, Marcus. And she's clearly been watching you, hoping you would find your way back to happiness. That doesn't come from a father who was absent. That comes from a father who was present enough for his daughter to know him, really know him." Marcus did not know how to respond to that, so he said nothing, and the silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria's voice was softer now. "Anything. Are you happy here with the job, with how things have turned out?" Marcus considered the question seriously, the way it deserved to be considered. "I don't think happiness is something I'm looking for anymore. It's something I'm building, every day, with the people I care about." He turned to face her. "And yes, standing here right now with you after everything that's happened, I think I'm closer to happy than I've been in a very long time." Victoria held his gaze, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. "I'm glad," she said simply. "You deserve it." Neither of them moved to close the distance between them. It was too soon for that, too complicated. But something had shifted, some wall had come down, and they both knew that the relationship between them was no longer just professional. It was something more. Something that scared Marcus and excited him in equal measure. Something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. The weeks that followed tested the boundaries of what Marcus could handle. His technical work continued to exceed expectations, earning praise from the board and jealous glances from competitors. But his personal life was becoming increasingly complicated, torn between his growing feelings for Victoria and his determination to remain the father Emma needed. And then there was Derek Sullivan, who had not forgotten his promise to make Marcus's life difficult. The attacks came subtly at first. Whispered comments in hallways about the nature of Marcus's relationship with Victoria. Suggestions that his hiring had been based on personal favoritism rather than professional merit. Carefully planted doubts about whether a man who had abandoned his career for 6 years could really be trusted with critical technical decisions. Marcus ignored it all, focusing on his work, trusting that results would speak louder than rumors. But Derek was patient, and his ultimate move came 3 months into Marcus's tenure as CTO. The man who appeared in the laboratory one Thursday afternoon was not someone Marcus recognized. Japanese around 50 expensive suit, the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room he entered. Marcus Reed. Marcus straightened from the prototype he had been examining. That's me. Thomas Nakamura, CEO of TechDrive. The name hit Marcus like cold water. TechDrive was Harborline's biggest competitor in the EV market, a company with deeper pockets and more aggressive timelines and a reputation for poaching talent. I know who you are. Then you know why I'm here. Nakamura smiled a practiced expression that revealed nothing. I'm prepared to offer you a position, CTO of our entire electric vehicle division, double your current salary, stock options, complete creative freedom, no office politics, no Derek Sullivans trying to undermine you at every turn. How do you know about Derek Sullivan? This industry is small, Mr. Reed. People talk. I know you're being squeezed. I know there are those who want to see you fail not because of your work, but because of their own ambitions. Nakamura spread his hands. I'm offering you a way out. A place where your talent will be appreciated without all the complications. Marcus was quiet for a moment, turning the offer over in his mind. Who told you I was being squeezed? Who suggested you come here with this offer? Something flickered in Nakamura's eyes. That's not important. It's important to me. The silence stretched between them, and Marcus understood with sudden clarity what was happening. Derek had orchestrated this, had fed information to a competitor, hoping that Marcus would take the bait and leave eliminating a threat while creating a scandal that would damage Victoria's reputation. It was clever. It was ruthless. It was exactly the kind of corporate maneuvering that Marcus had fled 6 years ago. I don't need an exit, Marcus said firmly. I need to finish what I started. Even if that means working under someone who is actively trying to destroy you. Derek Sullivan doesn't command me. Victoria Lawson commands me, and she's someone I trust. Nakamura studied him with what might have been respect. Loyalty like that is rare. It's not loyalty. It's integrity. I gave my word to Harrison Blake. I made a commitment to this project, to this team. I don't break commitments because someone offers me more money or an easier path. Marcus met Nakamura's eyes directly. You seem like a smart man, Mr. Nakamura. Smart enough to know that someone willing to abandon his principles for a better offer isn't someone you'd actually want running your technical division. The same weakness that would make me leave Harborline would eventually make me leave TechDrive too. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Nakamura nodded slowly. You're right. I apologize for wasting your time. He produced a business card and placed it on the workbench. But if you ever change your mind, if circumstances here become truly untenable, the offer stands. He left without another word, and Marcus stood alone in the laboratory, processing what had just happened. That evening, he told Victoria everything. The offer, his suspicions about Derek's involvement, his decision to stay. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. I knew Derek was ambitious, she said when he finished. I didn't know he was willing to commit corporate espionage to get what he wants. We can't prove it was him. Not yet. But I know people who can find out. Victoria's jaw was set with determination. He's not going to get away with this, Marcus. I promise you that. I don't care about making him pay. I care about doing my job and going home to my daughter every night. I know, and that's why I care about making him pay for you." The relationship between them had shifted again, the professional boundary growing thinner with each passing day. Their first real date happened on a Thursday evening 2 weeks after Derek's failed attempt to recruit Marcus away. Victoria suggested a small Italian restaurant called Lucia's 3 blocks from the Harborline office, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and food that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it with love. Rosa, the owner, greeted Victoria like a long-lost daughter. "Finally, you bring someone." The older woman's eyes sparkled as she studied Marcus. "For 3 years, I watch you eat alone at the corner table. Work, work, always work. I tell myself that girl needs someone to make her laugh. And now look." Victoria's cheeks flushed. "Rosa, this is Marcus. Marcus Rosa has been trying to set me up with her nephew for 2 years." "My nephew is an idiot." Rosa waved dismissively. "This one I like better. I can see it in his hands. Working hands, honest hands." She patted Marcus on the shoulder. "You take care of her, yes. She pretends to be tough, but inside she is soft like fresh mozzarella." "Rosa," Victoria groaned, "what is true?" Rosa winked at Marcus. "Best table for you, and tiramisu on the house. For love, I never charge." She bustled away before either of them could protest, and Marcus found himself laughing for the first time in what felt like years. "She's wonderful," he said. "She's a menace, but yes, wonderful too." Victoria smiled. "She lost her husband 8 years ago. Built this restaurant from nothing after he died. She tells me his recipes keep him alive." Marcus understood that more than Victoria could know. They spent more time together outside of work dinners that were not about project timelines, walks that had nothing to do with thermal management systems. Emma noticed and approved, making her opinions known with the unsubtle enthusiasm of a 12-year-old who had decided Victoria was exactly what their family needed. And Marcus was beginning to agree with her. The prototype was 3 weeks from completion when Marcus finally allowed himself to believe that everything might actually work out. He stood in the laboratory late on a Friday evening, long after the rest of the team had gone home, running his hands over the chassis of the vehicle that had consumed so much of his life for the past 4 months. The metal was cool beneath his fingers, smooth and precise, every component exactly where it should be. This was what he had been born to do. This was the work that had once defined him, before grief had convinced him that definition was a curse rather than a gift. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Victoria is here. She brought Chinese food. You're outvoted on dinner plans." Marcus smiled at the screen, a reflex he had almost forgotten he possessed. 6 months ago, the idea of someone waiting for him at home, of family dinners and shared meals, and the simple domestic joy of being expected would have seemed impossible. Now it was becoming routine, the best kind of routine. He took one last look at the prototype, whispered a promise to the machine that he would see it through to the end, and headed home. The apartment smelled like sesame chicken and something else. Something that took Marcus a moment to identify. Laughter. The sound of Emma and Victoria laughing together, a melody so unexpected and so perfect that he stood in the doorway for a full minute just listening. "Dad," Emma spotted him first. "Finally. Victoria has been telling me about the time she accidentally set her college dorm on fire trying to make ramen." "It was a small fire." Victoria protested, her cheeks flushing. "And the smoke alarm was very dramatic about the whole thing." "You set a fire, making ramen." Marcus raised an eyebrow as he joined them at the table. "And you're in charge of a major automotive project." Cooking and engineering are completely different skill sets. I'm an expert in one and a disaster in the other. Which is why I do the cooking, Emma announced proudly. Victoria is banned from our kitchen. Banned is a strong word. Banned is the accurate word. Remember the pancakes? Victoria groaned. The pancakes were an anomaly. The pancakes were charcoal. Artistic charcoal, but charcoal. Marcus watched them banner this woman he was falling for, and the daughter he would die for, and felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain. Something else. Something that felt like healing. You two have been spending a lot of time together, he observed. Victoria's been helping me with my science project, Emma said. Did you know she has a degree in mechanical engineering and business? She's like a genius or something. I'm aware of her qualifications. And she's teaching me about cars. Real teaching, not the boring stuff from books. She let me sit in the prototype last week and explained how the battery system works. Marcus looked at Victoria surprised. You took her to the lab? She asked, and she was genuinely curious, not just being polite. Victoria shrugged. Besides, I wanted her to see what her father has built. She should be proud of you, Marcus. She should understand exactly how remarkable what you're doing really is. Emma nodded vigorously. The thermal management thing you designed, Victoria, says it's going to be in textbooks someday. That engineers are going to study it like they study, I don't know, important engineering stuff. That might be a slight exaggeration. It's not, Victoria said firmly. And you need to stop deflecting compliments. Your work is exceptional. Own it. After dinner, Emma retreated to her room to finish homework, leaving Marcus and Victoria alone with the dishes and the comfortable silence that had become their default setting. She's incredible, Victoria said, handing him a plate to dry. You know that, right? The way she handles everything, the maturity she shows, the emotional intelligence. Most adults don't have half her awareness. She's had to grow up fast, faster than she should have. That's not what I mean. Victoria turned to face him, suds dripping from her fingers. She's not just mature because of trauma. She's wise because someone taught her how to be. Someone showed her how to process pain instead of running from it. Someone modeled resilience every single day, even when he thought he was failing. I did fail. For years I failed. No, you survived. There's a difference. Victoria dried her hands and reached up to touch his face, a gesture that still made his heart stutter. Failing would have been giving up. Failing would have been letting the grief win. You kept going. You kept being her father. You kept showing up even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. Marcus closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I keep waiting for this to fall apart, he admitted. For something to go wrong for reality, to remind me that I don't get to have this. Happiness, success, love. I had my chance with Rachel, and I wasted so much of it. Part of me feels like I don't deserve another one. That's grief talking. That's survivor's guilt. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. Rachel loved you. From everything Emma has told me, from everything you've shared, she loved you completely. And love like that doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't say you only get one chance. It says you deserve to be happy over and over again, as many times as it takes. She kissed him softly, a promise more than a passion. You deserve this, Marcus. You deserve Emma's laughter and this apartment and the work you're doing. You deserve to build something new without feeling like you're betraying something old. And I'm going to keep telling you that until you finally believe it. From her bedroom, Emma's voice floated through the thin walls. Are you two being gross in there? Because I can hear you being quiet, and quiet usually means gross. Victoria laughed, stepping back from Marcus with a theatrical sigh. We've been caught. We were not being gross, Marcus called back. We were having an adult conversation. That's what people say when they're being gross. I'm 12, not stupid. Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. This was his life now. Teasing from his daughter love from an unexpected source work that fulfilled him and hope that no longer felt like a foreign concept. It would not last forever. Nothing did. But for now in this moment, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. But the past was not finished with him yet. Margaret Reed arrived unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, her face set with the particular expression that Marcus had learned to recognize over 14 years of knowing her. His mother-in-law, Rachel's mother, the woman who had never quite approved of him even when her daughter was alive. We need to talk. They sat in the living room while Emma was at a friend's house, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Margaret was 65 now, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, carrying her grief like a weight she refused to set down. I've heard about your new job, and about the woman. Her name is Victoria. I know her name. Margaret's voice was cold. What I want to know is whether you've completely forgotten my daughter. Whether 6 years was all it took for you to move on and replace her with someone new. The accusation hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had asked himself the same question 100 times lying awake at night, wondering if his growing feelings for Victoria were a betrayal of everything Rachel had been to him. No one is replacing Rachel. No one ever could. Then what is this? What are you doing with this woman? I'm living Margaret. For the first time in 6 years, I'm actually living instead of just surviving. Marcus leaned forward, needing her to understand. Do you know what Rachel's last words to me were? She said, don't let losing me kill your heart. She said, be happy again. Love again. She made me promise. She was dying. She didn't know what she was saying. She knew exactly what she was saying. She knew me better than anyone, and she knew that I would try to crawl into the grave beside her if she didn't give me permission to keep living. Tears were forming in Margaret's eyes, the first crack in her armor. I just miss her so much. I know. I miss her too. Every single day. Marcus moved to sit beside her, taking her hand the way he had at Rachel's funeral, the way he had during the long months of her illness. But Rachel wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want me to be alone forever. She wouldn't want Emma to grow up with a father too afraid to love again. Victoria isn't replacing your daughter. She's not trying to erase Rachel or pretend she never existed. She asks about Rachel all the time. She wants to know who she was, what she was like, why I loved her. She's not threatened by Rachel's memory. She honors it. Margaret was crying openly now, the grief she had carried for 6 years, finally finding release. I'm just so afraid of losing Emma too. Of watching her forget her mother and bond with someone else. Emma will never forget Rachel. I won't let that happen. And Victoria won't either. Marcus squeezed her hand. We can all be part of this family, Margaret. You, me, Emma, and yes, Victoria too. Not replacing what we lost. Adding to what remains. They sat together for a long time, two people bound by love and loss, and the woman who had connected them finally finding a way to move forward without leaving the past behind. When Margaret left, she hugged Marcus for the first time since Rachel's funeral. I'll try, she said. "I can't promise more than that. That's all I need." The final confrontation with Derek Sullivan came 1 month before the prototype launch. He had been building his case, carefully collecting evidence, planting stories, preparing for the moment when he would bring Marcus down and Victoria along with him. But he had underestimated them both, and his overconfidence became his undoing. The board meeting was scheduled to discuss production timelines, but Derek had other plans. He had leaked information to the press about Marcus's questionable hiring, about his relationship with Victoria, about decisions that seemed to prioritize personal connections over professional judgment. Harborline stock dropped 7% in a single day. Harrison called an emergency session with a full board, and Marcus found himself sitting at the end of a long conference table, Victoria beside him, Derek at the far end, with a smile that barely concealed his triumph. "Mr. Reed," one of the board members began, "can you explain the nature of your relationship with Ms. Lawson?" Marcus stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "I can, but first I want to explain my work." He walked to the presentation screen, ignoring Derek's barely suppressed sneer. "In 6 months, I have redesigned the thermal management system, saving an estimated $12 million in warranty costs. I have identified and corrected 23 potential failure points before they became problems. I have built a technical team that is operating at 140% of their previous productivity." He turned to face the board directly. "My work speaks for itself. It does not need a relationship with anyone to have value. As for Victoria, yes, we are involved personally. Our relationship began 3 months after I was hired and 2 months after I had already proven my worth to this company. Anyone suggesting that she hired me because of personal feelings is not only wrong, but insulting to one of the most capable executives you have." Marcus looked at Derek, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Someone in this room has been actively trying to sabotage this project for personal gain. Someone has been leaking confidential information to competitors and planting stories with journalists. Someone cares more about their own advancement than the success of this company. That person is not me, and it's not Victoria." The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison leaned forward. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Reed. Do you have evidence?" "I do." Victoria stood and distributed folders to each board member. Inside was documentation of Derek's communications with Thomas Nakamura, records of leaked information, a timeline showing exactly how he had orchestrated the entire campaign against Marcus and the project. "We've been building this case for 6 weeks, Victoria said, waiting for him to make a move serious enough to justify action. The stock manipulation gave us everything we needed." Derek's face went pale as he realized what was happening. "This is fabricated. This is the result of your own arrogance," Harrison interrupted coldly. "You thought you were clever, Derek. You thought no one was watching. You were wrong." The board voted unanimously to terminate Derek Sullivan's employment effective immediately. As security escorted him from the building, Marcus felt Victoria's hand slip into his. "We did it," she whispered. "We did it together." That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus and Victoria stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city that had become home to both of them. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked. "Today was a lot." "I'm more than okay. I'm relieved." Marcus turned to face her. "I've spent 6 years running from corporate politics, from games and manipulation, and people who care more about power than doing good work. Today proved that you can fight back, that integrity can win." It doesn't always win. No, but today it did, and that's enough for now. Victoria moved closer, and this time Marcus did not step back. I love you, she said quietly. I've been wanting to say that for weeks, but the timing was never right, and I didn't want to complicate things while Derek was still a threat. The timing is right now. The timing is perfect now. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, looking into eyes that had seen him at his worst and chosen to believe in his best. I love you too. I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it. What changed? Emma told me I deserved to be happy. And Rachel, she told me the same thing before she died. I finally decided to believe them. He kissed her, then gentle and slow and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. What happens now? Now we finish building something great. The project, our careers, our family. Marcus pulled her close. And we see where this road takes us. Together. Together. Victoria agreed. I like the sound of that. Above them, the stars were bright against the Chicago sky. And somewhere, Marcus knew Rachel was watching. Approving finally at peace, knowing that the man she had loved was learning to live again. The stars above Chicago seemed brighter that night. Or perhaps Marcus was simply seeing them clearly for the first time in years. He had spent 6 years looking down, watching his feet, afraid to lift his eyes toward anything that resembled hope. Now he was looking up again, and the view was more beautiful than he remembered. The 20th of December arrived with the kind of cold that settled into bones and refused to leave. Marcus stood in the Harborline laboratory at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before the official launch event was scheduled to begin. The prototype sat in the center of the room, spotlights already positioned to illuminate every curve and angle, every innovation that had consumed the past 8 months of his life. He had not slept the night before. Not because of nerves, though those were present, humming beneath his skin like a current waiting to be grounded. He had not slept because he wanted to be here alone, before the crowds arrived and the cameras started rolling and the moment became something that belonged to everyone instead of just him. 8 months ago, he had been fixing heaters for elderly neighbors and charging $20 for work worth hundreds. 8 months ago, he had been a man hiding from his own potential, convinced that ambition was the enemy and success was a trap that had already cost him everything that mattered. Now he was standing in front of a vehicle that would change an industry. A vehicle that carried his fingerprints on every system, his experience in every solution, his redemption in every carefully calibrated component. He placed his hand on the hood, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm, and allowed himself a moment of pure, uncomplicated pride. "You're early." Marcus turned. Victoria stood in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in her hands, wearing the kind of smile that made his chest feel too small for his heart. Could not sleep. Neither could I. She walked toward him and handed over one of the cups. I kept thinking about everything that led to this moment. The highway, the sandwich, all of it. Seems like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. We're different people now. Victoria looked at the prototype, then back at Marcus. Better people, I think. At least I hope so. Marcus sipped his coffee and considered her words. Better was a complicated concept. He was certainly more functional than he had been a year ago, more engaged with the world, more willing to believe that the future held something other than loss. But better implied improvement over a baseline, and his baseline had been so low that almost anything would qualify as progress. "I keep waiting to wake up," he admitted. to discover that this was all some elaborate dream and I'm still in that apartment, still fixing garbage disposals for spare change, still pretending that survival was the same as living. It's not a dream. It's just life. Your life, the one you built, when you finally stopped being afraid of building things. The laboratory began filling with people over the next 2 hours. Engineers and executives and journalists all converging on this space that had been Marcus's second home for the better part of a year. He shook hands and answered questions and accepted congratulations with the grace of someone who had learned to receive praise without deflecting it entirely. Emma arrived at 8:30, escorted by Margaret, both of them dressed in their finest and wearing expressions of barely contained excitement. His daughter pushed through the crowd to reach him, throwing her arms around his waist with the unself-conscious affection of a child who had never learned to hide her feelings. "Dad, this is incredible." "You think so? Are you kidding? There are like 100 people here to see something you made. That's the coolest thing ever." Marcus hugged her tighter, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in the reality of her presence. This was why he had come back. Not for the recognition or the salary or the professional redemption. For her, for the chance to show her that broken things could be repaired, that grief did not have to be permanent, that a person could fall apart and still find a way to become whole again. "I'm glad you're here, Bug. Where else would I be?" Harrison Blake took the stage at 9 o'clock sharp, his voice carrying through the laboratory, with the practiced confidence of a man who had delivered hundreds of speeches to hundreds of crowds. He spoke about innovation and vision and the future of transportation, about Harborline's commitment to excellence, and the team that had made this moment possible. Marcus barely heard any of it. He was watching the prototype, remembering every late night and early morning, every problem solved, an obstacle overcome. He was thinking about Rachel, about how she would have stood in this crowd if she had lived, how proud she would have been, how she would have teased him afterward about his discomfort with attention and his inability to accept compliments gracefully. She would have loved this. She would have loved seeing him engaged with the world again, passionate about something other than grief. And she would have loved Victoria. The thought came unbidden, but not unwelcome. Rachel had always wanted Marcus to be happy, had always worried that his tendency toward isolation would leave him stranded if anything ever happened to her. In those final weeks when she knew the end was coming, she had made him promise to keep living, to find joy again, to open his heart to the possibility of love, even if it terrified him. He had broken that promise for 6 years. He was finally keeping it now. And now, Harrison was saying, the moment we've all been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the future of Harborline Motors. A technician approached the prototype with a key fob. The crowd fell silent. Marcus held his breath. The engine started. Smooth, quiet, perfect. Not a single hesitation, not a single stutter, just the pure hum of technology operating exactly as designed. The dashboard lights stabilized systems coming online in the precise sequence. Marcus had specified every component communicating with every other component in the symphony of engineering he had spent 8 months conducting. The laboratory erupted in applause. Michelle reached him first, pulling him into a hug that was equal parts celebration and relief. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it. I just helped." "Stop that." She pulled back and looked at him sternly. "Stop diminishing what you contributed. This would not exist without you. This team would not be what it is without you. Own that, Marcus. You've earned it. Emma was next, squeezing through the crowd to wrap her arms around him again. Her eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. Mom would be so proud of you. The words hit Marcus like a physical force. He had been thinking about Rachel all morning, carrying her memory through every moment of this triumph, but hearing Emma say it aloud made it real in a way his own thoughts could not. I hope so, Bug. I really hope so. I know so. She's probably watching right now, bragging to all the angels about how her husband is a genius. Marcus laughed through the tightness in his throat. I don't think that's how heaven works. How would you know? Have you been there? Fair point. The celebration continued for hours, an endless stream of handshakes and photographs and interviews with journalists who wanted to know about the thermal management system and the powertrain efficiency and all the technical details that Marcus could explain in his sleep. He answered every question patiently, giving credit to the team whenever possible, deflecting personal praise toward the collective effort that had made this moment possible. But inside, in the quiet spaces of his heart that no one else could see, he was allowing himself to feel something he had not felt in years. Triumph. Real triumph. The kind that came from doing difficult work well and seeing it through to completion. He had forgotten what that felt like. He was grateful to remember. 1 month after the prototype launch, Marcus sat across from Emma at their kitchen table, his heart pounding with a nervousness that seemed absurd given everything he had accomplished in the past year. He had faced down corporate sabotage and board meetings and the judgment of colleagues who doubted his abilities. He had rebuilt a career from nothing and proven himself in an industry that had forgotten he existed. None of that compared to what he was about to do. Bug, I need to talk to you about something. Emma set down her phone with the exaggerated patience of a teenager who had learned to tolerate her father's need for serious conversations. Is this about Victoria? How did you know? Dad, I'm 12, not blind. You look at her the way you used to look at Mom. Different, but also the same. Like she's the most important person in whatever room she's in. Marcus had not realized he was so transparent. Or perhaps Emma was simply more perceptive than he gave her credit for. I'm thinking about asking her to marry me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and Marcus felt his anxiety spike with each passing second. He needed her approval. Not just wanted it, needed it. Victoria could never truly be part of their family if Emma did not welcome her, and Marcus would never force his daughter to accept something that made her uncomfortable. Dad. Emma's voice was serious in a way that made her sound far older than 12. I need to tell you something. Anything. I will always love Mom. She was my mother, and nobody can ever replace her. Not Victoria, not anyone. That's just how it is. I know, Bug. I would never ask you to. Let me finish. Emma held up her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of Rachel that Marcus's heart clenched. Victoria isn't trying to replace Mom. She's just being herself. And I like who she is. I like how she treats you, how she treats me, how she never pretends to be something she's not. Emma paused, gathering her thoughts. But more than that, I like who you are when you're with her. You smile more. You laugh more. You seem like you actually want to be alive instead of just going through the motions. So, if you want to ask her to marry you, you have my blessing. Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she died, she made me promise to take care of you to make sure you didn't get too sad. And I've been trying, but I can't do it alone. Victoria can help. She already has. Marcus felt tears sliding down his cheeks, unchecked and unashamed. His daughter, this remarkable child who had lost her mother at 6 and grown up with a grieving father, was giving him permission to love again. Was telling him that happiness was not a betrayal of Rachel's memory, but a fulfillment of her final wish. Thank you, Bug. You have no idea what that means to me. I have some idea. Emma grinned through her own tears. So do you need help picking out a ring? Because I have opinions, and they're all correct. They spent the next hour looking at jewelry websites together, arguing about styles and sizes and the relative merits of different diamond cuts. Emma had strong preferences and was not shy about expressing them, and Marcus found himself grateful for her guidance in a realm he knew nothing about. In the end, they chose a simple band with a modest stone elegant rather than ostentatious, the kind of ring that Rachel would have approved of. The kind of ring that said, "I love you," without shouting it. The kind of ring Victoria would actually wear. 1 year to the day after her BMW had died on Interstate 90, Marcus drove Victoria to the exact spot where they had first met. The November air was brutal wind cutting in from Lake Michigan with the kind of cold that made breathing painful. But Marcus had planned this carefully, had chosen this location and this date with deliberate intention, and he was not going to let weather derail what he had spent weeks preparing. Why are we stopping here? Victoria looked around at the unremarkable stretch of highway confusion evident in her voice. Is something wrong with the truck? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to show you something. They got out of the vehicle and walked to the shoulder, the same spot where Victoria's BMW had sat helpless a year ago, the same spot where Marcus had made a decision that changed both their lives. This is where we met, Victoria said, realization dawning. This is the exact place. 1 year ago today, you were 28 minutes late to a meeting that was going to change your career. Your battery terminals were corroded, and your fuel pump relay was dead. You were terrified and trying not to show it. And you stopped, a complete stranger in an old pickup truck, and you stopped to help me when you had no reason to. I had every reason. Marcus turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I didn't know it at the time, but I was dying. Not physically, but inside where it mattered. I had been dying for 6 years, ever since Rachel and I had convinced myself that was acceptable. That survival was enough, that I didn't deserve anything more than just getting through each day. Then I saw you, broken down on the side of the road, fighting not to fall apart, and something in me recognized something in you. 2 people trying to hold themselves together when everything was falling apart around them. Victoria's eyes were glistening, but she did not speak. She was waiting for him to finish. I stopped because you needed help, but you ended up helping me more than I helped you. You gave me a sandwich and a business card and a chance to remember who I used to be. You gave me a reason to believe that the past wasn't a prison. You gave me hope. Marcus reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Victoria's breath caught audibly. 1 year ago, I was a man with nothing. No career, no purpose, no faith in the future. Now I have everything. A job I love, a daughter who's thriving, and a woman who saw something in me worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. He lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the protest from joints that were not as young as they used to be. Victoria Lawson, you saved my life, even though you didn't know you were doing it. And I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Will you marry me?" The tears spilling down Victoria's cheeks caught the weak November sunlight. "Yes. 1,000,000 times, you're 1,000,000,000 times yes. Every yes that exists now and forever." Marcus slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled only slightly. Then he stood and kissed her there on the shoulder of Interstate 90 with traffic rushing past and the cold wind cutting through their coats, and neither of them caring about anything except this moment, this person, this love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I didn't think I could love anyone again after Rachel. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong. You just weren't ready. There's a difference." They stood there for a long time, holding each other against the cold two people who had found each other in the midst of separate disasters and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Marcus thought about Rachel, about how she would have felt seeing him here finally moving forward. He chose to believe she was happy, that wherever she was, whatever came after this life, she was watching with approval and maybe even relief. He had kept his promise. He had chosen to live again. And it was better than he had ever imagined. The house was not large, but it was perfect. 3 bedrooms in a quiet suburb with a backyard big enough for a dog and neighbors who waved when you passed them on the sidewalk. The kind of place Marcus had never imagined owning, the kind of place that felt like a statement about permanence and commitment and faith in the future. They moved in 6 months after the engagement, a chaotic weekend of boxes and furniture, and the inevitable discovery that nobody had packed the essentials in accessible locations. Emma claimed her room immediately, the one with the window overlooking the backyard, and spent the first 3 hours arranging and rearranging her belongings until everything was exactly right. Victoria brought surprisingly little with her from the high-rise apartment she had occupied for years. Most of her furniture was sold or donated, replaced by pieces that fit the new aesthetic they were building together. She kept her books, hundreds of them, and Marcus built shelves in the living room to accommodate the collection that had been crammed into inadequate spaces for far too long. And then there was Butterscotch. The golden retriever puppy had been Emma's request, repeated with increasing frequency over the 6 years since Rachel's death. Marcus had always said, no citing the apartment's size, the cost of pet ownership, the responsibility of caring for another living thing when he could barely care for himself. But things were different now. Everything was different now. Butterscotch took to the backyard like he had been waiting his entire 8-week life for this exact space. He ran in circles until he exhausted himself, then collapsed in a heap of golden fur and slept for 3 hours straight. Emma sat beside him the entire time, stroking his ears and whispering secrets that Marcus pretended not to hear. "This is really happening," Victoria said, standing beside Marcus on the back porch as they watched Emma and the dog. "We really did this. House dog family. The whole thing." Having second thoughts. "Not even close. Just amazed that we got here. A year ago, I was married to my job and convinced that was enough. Now I have you and Emma and this ridiculous puppy, and I can't imagine wanting anything else." Marcus pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Rachel would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so. She always said the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't give them anything back. You helped me when I was just some stranger on the highway. That's exactly the kind of thing she respected." Emma carries pieces of her mother I didn't even know existed. Sometimes she'll say something or make a gesture, and I'll see Rachel so clearly it stops my heart. She's keeping her mother alive in ways I never could." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the November sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside the house, boxes still needed unpacking. Furniture still needed arranging. 1,000 small tasks waited to transform this empty structure into a home. But those could wait. This moment was too precious to rush. Margaret arrived on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after they had finished settling in. She brought photo albums, carefully preserved documentation of a life that had ended too soon. Pictures of Rachel as a child, gap-toothed and grinning. Pictures from college, from the wedding, from Emma's birth, and first steps and first day of school. A complete visual record of the woman Marcus had loved and lost. "I think Victoria should have these," Margaret said, setting the albums on the kitchen table. "She's part of this family now. She should know who Rachel was." Victoria looked at the albums, then at Margaret, her expression uncertain. "Are you sure these are your memories of your daughter? I don't want to intrude on that." "You're not intruding. You're continuing." Margaret's voice was steady, the product of months of working through her own grief and resistance. Rachel would have wanted Marcus to find someone. She would have wanted Emma to have a mother figure again. And she would have wanted whoever filled that role to understand what came before. "Victoria, you're not replacing my daughter. Nobody can replace her. But you're loving the people she loved, caring for them the way she would have wanted them to be cared for. That means something. That matters." The two women embraced an image Marcus never would have predicted a year ago. Margaret, who had initially viewed Victoria as a threat to Rachel's memory. Victoria, who had been so careful to respect the grief of a family she was joining. Now they stood together, connected by their shared love for the same people, united in their commitment to honoring the past while building the future. Marcus watched from the doorway, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for years. This was healing, real healing. The kind that came not from forgetting pain, but from integrating it into something larger. Rachel would always be part of their story. Her death would always cast a shadow over their happiness. But shadows did not have to be prisons, and pain did not have to be permanent. They were proof of that now. All of them together. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the backyard of the house they had built into a home. 50 guests, no more. Family and close friends and colleagues who had become something closer than colleagues over the past year. The ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon, time to catch the golden light of a June sunset. And the weather cooperated perfectly warm without being oppressive, clear skies stretching to every horizon. Emma served as maid of honor, a role she had negotiated, fiercely refusing the traditional flower girl position on the grounds that she was 13 now and far too mature for such childish duties. She wore a dress that Victoria had helped her choose, simple and elegant, and she carried herself with a poise that made Marcus's heart swell with pride. Michelle Chen read a poem about love and loss and the courage required to try again. Harrison Blake served as an unofficial master of ceremonies, delivering remarks that were surprisingly moving for a man known primarily for his business acumen. Margaret sat in the front row beside Victoria's mother, two women from different worlds who had bonded over their shared investment in this union. And Butterscotch, now a gangly adolescent of 7 months, wore a bow tie and behaved impeccably for the duration of the ceremony, which everyone agreed was a minor miracle. When the moment came for vows, Marcus found himself struggling to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. A year ago, I was a man who had given up on everything. I thought protecting my heart from more pain meant never opening it again. I thought survival was the same as living. I thought the best days of my life were behind me. You proved me wrong about all of it. You showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling afraid and moving forward anyway. You showed me that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a new chapter, one that honors what came before while reaching toward what comes next. You showed me that love isn't something you find once and hold forever. It's something you choose every single day, even when choosing is hard, especially when choosing is hard. Marcus reached for Victoria's hand, steadying himself on her presence. I choose you, today and tomorrow and every day after that, for as long as I have breath in my body and love in my heart, I choose you. Victoria was crying openly, making no effort to hide her tears. When she spoke, her voice was thick but steady. When I met you, I was successful by every measure that mattered to the world. I had the job and the apartment and the career trajectory. I had everything I was supposed to want. But I was empty, hollow in ways I didn't even recognize until you showed me what fullness could feel like. You taught me that success without meaning is just exhaustion with better scenery. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only path to connection that actually matters. And you gave me a family. Not just you, but Emma and Margaret and this whole beautiful, complicated, improbable group of people who somehow became mine. I don't have words big enough for what you've given me, so I'll just say this: I'm yours, completely and forever. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Emma stepped forward, taking both their hands in hers, creating a circle that represented everything they had built. Mom would be happy, she said quietly, so only they could hear. She'd be so, so happy. Marcus kissed Victoria for the first time as his wife and the backyard erupted in applause. Butterscotch barked enthusiastically, having reached his limit for dignified behavior. Emma laughed and cried simultaneously, a skill she had inherited from her mother. And Marcus, standing in the golden light of a perfect June evening, surrounded by everyone he loved, finally allowed himself to believe that the best days of his life were not behind him. They were happening right now. 1 year after the wedding, 2 years after the meeting on Interstate 90, the Reed-Lawson family hosted a barbecue. The backyard was crowded with people who had become important to them. The engineering team from Harborline still riding high on the success of the EV launch. Neighbors who had welcomed them into the community with casseroles and lawn care advice. Friends old and new, all gathered to celebrate nothing more specific than the simple fact of being alive and together on a beautiful summer afternoon. Harrison Blake was telling stories to Michelle Chen, both of them laughing at some corporate misadventure from years past. Margaret was teaching Emma how to make her grandmother's famous potato salad, a recipe that had been in the family for 3 generations. Rosa from the Italian restaurant downtown had brought enough lasagna to feed an army, refusing all payment with the firm insistence that family didn't charge family. Marcus stood on the back porch, watching the chaos unfold, feeling a contentment so profound it almost frightened him. You're thinking too hard. Victoria appeared at his side, handing him a beer he had not asked for, but definitely wanted. I can see the gears turning from here. Just remembering, 2 years ago today, I was driving to fix an old woman's heater for $20. I had $47 in my wallet and a sandwich I couldn't bring myself to eat. The famous sandwich. The one that changed everything. Marcus took a sip of his beer. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For something to go wrong and remind me that happiness this complete isn't sustainable. Maybe it isn't. Maybe tomorrow everything falls apart. Victoria leaned into him, her warmth a counterpoint to the cooling evening air. But that's true of everyone, isn't it? Nobody gets guarantees. We just get today. And today is pretty damn good. Today is perfect. Then stop worrying about tomorrow and enjoy what you have. Emma bounded over Butterscotch at her heels, both of them radiating the manic energy of youth and canine enthusiasm. Dad Victoria, Grandma Margaret is telling stories about Mom again. The one about the time she tried to fix the car herself and set off all the alarms. You have to come listen. Marcus looked at Victoria, who was already smiling. Lead the way, Bug. They joined the group gathered around Margaret, listening to a story they had all heard before, but never tired of hearing. Rachel, young and stubborn and determined to prove she could handle anything accidentally triggering every security system in a parking garage while trying to jumpstart her own battery. The chaos that ensued. The security guards who had to be convinced she was not a car thief. The laughter that lasted for years afterward. Marcus listened to his mother-in-law describe his first wife's misadventure, watched his daughter absorb another piece of her mother's history, felt his current wife squeeze his hand in understanding and support. This was his life now. All of it the joy and the grief and the complicated beauty of building something new without erasing what came before. He was grateful for every piece of it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Marcus stood and raised his glass. Can I have everyone's attention for a moment? The backyard fell quiet, all eyes turning toward him. 2 years ago, I was a man who had lost everything that mattered. My wife was gone. My career was gone. My faith in the future was gone. I was surviving, but I wasn't living. There's a difference, and it took me too long to understand what that difference meant. Then one morning I stopped on a highway to help a stranger with a broken-down car. Not because I was noble or generous, but because I needed to feel useful. I needed to believe I could still make a difference in someone's day. That stranger gave me a sandwich, and somehow that sandwich led to this. To all of you. To this house, this family, this life I never imagined I would have again. Marcus looked around at the faces of people he loved. The lesson I learned is simple. Sometimes the smallest moments have the biggest consequences. A broken car, a kind gesture, a sandwich offered without expectation of return. We can't control what happens to us. We can only control how we respond. We can choose to help when we see someone struggling. We can choose to love when love seems impossible. We can choose to begin again when beginning again seems terrifying. So here's to small moments, to strangers who become family, to second chances we didn't know we needed, and to sandwiches that change everything. Cheers! 50 voices responded in unison. The party continued as darkness fell, laughter echoing across the backyard and into the neighborhood beyond. Eventually, guests began departing, offering hugs and promises to do this again soon. Emma fell asleep on the outdoor sofa, Teeterscotch curled at her feet, both of them exhausted by a day filled with activity and joy. Marcus and Victoria stood together on the porch, surveying the empty yard and the lingering evidence of celebration. "Are you happy?" Victoria asked. Marcus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Happiness was complicated. It did not erase grief or eliminate regret. It did not promise permanence or protection from future pain. But it was real. It was present. It was more than he had allowed himself to hope for during those 6 years of hiding from the world. Happiness isn't something I'm searching for anymore, he said slowly. It's something I'm building every day with the people I love. And right now, standing here with you, looking at our daughter and our dog and this life we've created together, I can honestly say, yes, I'm happy. Completely and truly happy. Victoria kissed him softly. Good. That's all I wanted to hear. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere out on Interstate 90, cars were passing the unremarkable stretch of highway where their story had begun. Drivers rushing to destinations preoccupied with their own concerns, unaware that they were passing sacred ground. But Marcus knew. He would always know. Sometimes, he said to the night air, speaking to Victoria and to Rachel and to the universe that had conspired to bring him here, broken things can be fixed. Cars, hearts, lives. You just need the right person at the right time and a little bit of courage to start over. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. And a sandwich, Marcus laughed. And a sandwich. Inside the house, their daughter slept peacefully. Their dog dreamed of chasing squirrels. Their home waited to shelter them through whatever came next. Marcus Reed, the man who had once believed his story was over, understood now that it had only just begun. He took Victoria's hand and led her inside, closing the door on the night and opening it to all the tomorrows still waiting to be lived. Not an ending, a beginning. The best kind of beginning. The kind that grew from loss and blossomed into love. The kind that proved once and for all that the human heart was capable of more than it knew, more than it ever dared to dream.